Hey guys, how's it going? Kripparrian here. Today I'm going to give you guys a guide on how to speedrun the campaign in Path of Exile 2. You may have taken quite some time on your first character. That's okay, I did as well. Everyone did. The campaign is actually a really lengthy one, but because you can't respec your ascendancy, even if you pick the same class at the start and you want to enjoy the different possibilities of classes and builds in Path of Exile 2, you might be having to level a lot of characters. So it is important to know how to run it pretty quickly. Now, I'm not teaching you guys how to get the world record speedrun or anything, but I was able to do a 7-hour run, finish the entire campaign and ascendancies, so I think it is pretty good, pretty decent to actually just do it a lot faster so you can focus more on what you want to do. So today I want to give you guys a few tips. Here we go. Let's get started right into it. First thing, the importances of gameplay. So I really like to do in the interface, show life mana values and show mini life bars above NPCs, allies, and enemies just so you can kind of see stuff a little bit better. That's a really big part of it. I also find it really important to highlight items. Now for me, the key is Z, but I don't know what the default is because I change my keybinds so much. Possibly that's the default, but it's called highlighting items. So you can kind of always see items on the ground, but this also always lets you see vendors and waypoints. It just makes it a lot easier to actually click on things. Past the basics, get some leveling uniques. A few really big standouts for me. Number one is Foxshade. So Foxshade is the only armor in the game that will actually make you run faster, and it has pretty good stats. Evasion is incredibly good for going through things quickly. Now, while armor might reduce the hit, yes, but you'll still get hit. You'll still build your stun meter, you'll still get stunned. And there's a few issues with armor. I'll go into that in a second. Evasion, you just kind of avoid getting hit at all, which means you don't get stunned. You can just run through things a lot better. And because you probably will be leveling quite a lot of characters, you should put some sockets in your gear. You should, put the decent runes, maybe even get some quality. I used Foxshade until almost level 70 on my run the other day. Get some kind of damage. Pillar of the Cage God is a thing that I use. I think it's very good. A lot of people like to level with Widow Hail, and they just kind of level up and use different, more and more powerful quivers as they go up. It's extremely important to have movement speed boots. Wanderlust gives you 20% pretty early. It's a pretty high recommended gear for me. It's important to get just general gear that has skill levels on it. Honestly, resistance stuff are not that important. I completed the campaign with -2 lightning resist yesterday. It can be tricky. You might get one-shotted, but it's not that bad to just die and try it again, unless you're playing hardcore, of course. If you can afford it, try to get an amulet with an anoint. The anoint is a huge amount of power early on because you basically have nothing. And one of the best anoints in the game is battle hardened. One hand, because it's just really good, taking 20% less damage from crits, or reduced bonus damage. It's like 10% less damage taken approximately a lot of the time. Armor and evasion, strength and dexterity. So this is just ridiculous, and the cost is super cheap. Like I could anoint like 30 of these, and I haven't even done that much delirium. What I mentioned about armor, it's because armor slows you down. Things that have no armor on them slow you down the least. Things that have only armor, like if Foxshade was, instead of evasion, just armor, it would reduce my movement speed by, I think, 6% as a multiplier. Most of what you're doing in the campaign is just running through stuff. So anything that makes you slower is a big no-no. Avoid anything with armor on it on your chest piece, and avoid anything with armor on it on your shield. Now, in terms of leveling stuff, it's pretty easy to respec. The respec is still pretty cheap, even in like the 70s, so you really should level with something that is good for leveling. You shouldn't really bother about leveling with the build that you want to play later. That doesn't really matter so much. You can spend like 100k gold and respec at level 70 most of the time. It's not really a big deal. In terms of skills, I really like Heralds, just because, again, a lot of the time, most of the campaign is running through stuff and killing trash mobs. The Heralds are really, really good for killing trash mobs because it's kind of like a spell trigger on kill. You're doing lots of killing when you're doing the campaign. It's really important. It's also really important to generally try to get some physical damage. I wouldn't go too far out of your way, but the reason physical damage is really good, I actually didn't know this until leveling my last 2 characters, characters, the monsters in the campaign have like 10 times less stun threshold than every single monster in a map. You can literally stun any monster by just doing physical damage to it. It's a huge defensive layer, especially when you're doing a proactive speed-based playstyle. Now, I mentioned no armor, but you can make an exception with your shield. It's really important to get a weapon swap shield because of the shield charge movement skill. So the shield charge is actually available at very low level. You can actually keep it low level because you don't actually care to scale the damage. Don't even level it. Just use a low level shield charge, and it's really good. Shield charge works like this. It is based on your maybe attack speed and movement speed combined, but it helps you get around. It helps you basically do a lot more and move a lot faster, which is the name of the game. Now, shield charge as a skill I initially described as a terrible and clunky one, and while it is, I do feel it has some charm to it. So if you use it, you can actually turn as your shield charge, so it's not actually a straight line. You can kind of guide it a little bit. You see I had like a corner there. You can also cancel it at any moment. So if you're like shield charging up, okay, it doesn't go through monsters. That's true. That's true. So if you're shield charging up and you see the doorway there, you can cancel with a dodge roll. And if you notice that you're going like the wrong way, let's say you're going that way with a shield charge, you can actually cancel absolutely instantly. So it kind of helps you practice on your dodge roll. It's actually a very good movement skill, and leveling with it is probably going to give you quite a lot of good practice, so you can actually use it in endgame. Now, the way that it works is you just put the shield charge button on your bar, and it will automatically weapon swap if you have something with another weapon. So you see I have shield charge on Q and quarterstaff on W. You can manually weapon swap, in my case it's with the X key, or you can just use the ability. If you press the button once, it will initiate the weapon swap. If you hold it down, it'll do the weapon swap and use the ability. But if you just like tap it, sometimes it'll just weapon swap and not actually use the ability. So you might have to double tap the key. And there is a small delay in weapon swapping, and you should generally get in the practice of weapon swapping. While you might shield charge, if you want to run faster in between shield charges, you should weapon swap because your shield probably has armor on it, and anything with armor slows you down. You can actually check this in the page. So I have 25 movement speed with the shield, and if I swap out of the shield, I have 29% movement speed. So actually a pretty sizable difference, again, given the fact that we're actually just running around the map quite a lot. Another standout skill for me is the basic skill for a weapon. So if you have a weapon equipped, it can be even a caster weapon, that skill is free, which means you don't need to like work with mana. You can put some of the strongest supports, which typically have mana cost multipliers. And in the case of a lot of at least the melee skills, they're really good. The quarterstaff strike and the mace strike are actually the highest damage abilities for single target in the entire game for those respective things that don't have a cooldown. And things with cooldowns are obviously very good, like Hammer of the Gods, anything with a cooldown to kind of help you against the boss. It's nice to have a few extra skills, but using the free skill as your base is actually very powerful. Now, as you level, you will have to satisfy some gem requirements, so you might need some stats. These early points near your starting position are quite good in order to get you a few of the early stats, sure, but generally speaking, you want to first focus on damage. Damage first. So damage in PoE, there's like the multiplier damage, which is quite rare. It's the way gems work, a few other things with gem levels, for example. And there is additive damage. Usually additive damage is very abundant, but when you're first starting a character, you don't have any. Like if you have no additive damage, this first point on warrior effectively is a 15% damage multiplier. So it's really key to actually go for percent damage. Whatever you're playing, whatever you're doing, damage first is the way to go. Another really big one that I recommend is resist penetration. So my leveling character largely did cold damage. So I went with resist pen cold, resist pen cold, resist pen cold. Now, in endgame, these are bad nodes. They're bad nodes because it's more effective to use exposure and curse to more than double your damage with the said element. However, again, speed is the name of the game. If you curse, not only do you have to actually use the curse, which uses a ton of mana, takes some cast time, but curses have a base 1 second delay before they even trigger. So if you're actually cursing and then killing when you're doing the campaign, It's terribly slow. You really don't want to be doing that. It doesn't matter that you double your damage if you're going to kill the mobs in 1 or 2 attacks anyway, which, if you have everything going well, is what you should be aiming for. Next up, I have movement speed. Now, movement speed would typically be number 1 because of how I mentioned it's so important. The reason it's not the top priority is because on the passive tree, it's such in small amounts. It's quite unfortunate that they say movement speed at such a premium, but understanding that it is such a premium, just getting a little bit is quite nice, but I wouldn't go too far out of your way. But for like Ranger, for example, the starting nodes for movement speed, these are insane. This is 10 movement speed right at the start. That is absolutely crazy. The other one would be action speed. Now, action speed is a new stat in Path of Exile 2. It's also called skill speed, you can see. So skill speed is cast speed and attack speed. But if you're only using spells, then cast speed is the same. If you're only using attacks, then attack speed is the same. Just speed for doing things. Now, as far as the campaign, you should avoid doing optional things. Now, there are some optional things you might just come across. So it is what it is. Generally speaking, if you press the U key, you can kind of see the map. This map is useful for a number of reasons. So you can kind of see where you are there. And sometimes you'll have like a number of icons around the map. The way to see if something is optional or not is through these icons. So anything that has like a plus, now I know it looks really faint there, and there's a plus there that's really faint, and there's a plus there that's really faint. They're extra faint because I already did them. So these are the very important quest rewards that give you permanent buffs to your character. These can and do include skill points, percent HP, resistances. In some cases, they have very unique bonuses, like the Venom thing. So really, really big stuff. It's very important to actually get these. And you can use these kind of for like a map direction. Sometimes when you're in the map itself, it's not really the case for this one. I should have thought about it a bit more. But like... you can sometimes tell the direction that they are in. So if I'm in like one of the open maps, at least you can kind of tell that. So, you know, Kabbalah is in Keth, and if I was in Keth and she was here, Kabbalah will generally be like on the left side of the map. There are a few cases where this doesn't hold true, but I would say that it holds true about 85 to 90% of the time. So getting your directions from that is quite good. In terms of actually managing yourself when you are in a map, it's very important to know how to manipulate checkpoints. So the waypoint is a checkpoint, but you can't teleport to it. But there are mostly things that you can teleport to. So let's say I went over here and I killed a few mobs and I got like the drop from the zone that I needed for the quest. Now what? To progress, I need to go to the Titan Grotto, right? Yes, that's true. I could walk over there. Honestly, in this case, I probably would walk over there, but we can pretend it's a little bit further. I have additional options, so I can press escape and do respawn at checkpoint. When I do this, it respawns all the mobs in the entire map. Typically, you might think of this as slowing you down, but a lot of the time, if you're playing an efficient build, you can kill stuff as you walk through the map about the same speed as you just walking through the map. So it's free XP the way that I see it, at least on the builds that are able to do that. So this will bring you to the last checkpoint, wherever that is. In my case, it was here, but let's say it wasn't. Let's say it was up here. You can actually teleport between the checkpoints, and the teleport between the checkpoint function does not reset the map. So it's a very powerful feature, because if you combine it with respawn at checkpoint, you can actually save yourself a massive amount of time running around the map and get some extra experience on the way. Like if this was my last checkpoint, I would have teleported here, and then I can use this to teleport to any of the other checkpoints that I have gone past in this zone. Again, the waypoint is kind of like a checkpoint in terms of like a save state, but you cannot teleport to or from it. Just keep that in mind. But a lot of time the waypoint will actually have a checkpoint on it. So I can just teleport to there, or if I like missed something there, I can teleport to there. And that's why it's really important that if you see a checkpoint on your map, that you actually run beside it, because you activate it, and almost all checkpoints have something to do. Either it's like a part of the map where there isn't a checkpoint, or pretty much every single quest in the game has a checkpoint. Now, when it comes to being in town, you will find yourself that sometimes you need a little bit more gear. The vendors in Path of Exile 2 have pretty good gear options, and they will have some options of your level. Now, you can use the control to click and to kind of get the stuff instantly. You can use the control left click to instantly ID all of your items on the hooded one. So a little bit of a shortcut. Now, while you might be needing an item here, what you can use is actually the search box. Let me actually move over here so you can see it. So I can type rare in the search box and it'll just show me the rares. So I don't actually have to look at all the items. I can just look at the ones that might actually be upgrades for me. Hey, mana leech and some resist, whatever, sure, why not? Another key term that you might want to utilize for this function is skill. So I can do skill, and this one has, wow, look at that, 70 fire damage plus 3 all fire skills at level 31 with Sigil of Power. That's actually an amazing leveling staff, for example. So I don't have to spend the time just looking the items one by one, and yeah, it's just a very efficient way to use the vendor screen. Jewelry is also pretty rare. If you see jewelry on this vendor, you might just want to have a quick look. Fitting the jewelry slots on a leveling character or your first character is actually going to be pretty tricky a lot of the time. Now, I'm not sure which one is the gamble vendor here. I guess it's this one. Yeah, so one of the things that you might consider gambling are amulets and rings, just because you might not have full slots for them. Like, if you have only one ring, and you have an empty ring slot, just any ring with anything on it is going to be the easiest way to upgrade your character, as you might imagine. So you want to do it that way. When it comes to the ascendancy points, I kind of skew towards the Trial of Seamus, which is the Sanctum. You do have to do Seamus for your first ascendancy. You have to do the Ultimatum trials for the second ascendancy, but after that you get to choose. It's a big help if you actually can mule the relics from your other characters. The relics are not shared between characters. You have to actually begin one of the Trial of Seamus and actually mule the relics from your character to your new character. It's also pretty nice to just have a stash full of relics. Generally speaking, you really only need relics with honor resistance, and if it's your first character or it is a character that you haven't fully gotten the most number of relics, you can also kind of utilize the chest rewards. You don't really need anything to complete the first Trial of Seamus, so you can use your bronze keys at the end to open specifically the relic coffers to get some decent relics for when you do it later. Now, when you are doing it later, it's pretty important to know kind of like the key levels involved. So this also ties into what maps you might do once you actually finish the campaign, but the levels that you get on these things does matter. So the number of trials 4 means you can get your 4th ascendancy point from it, and some of these are going to be, I don't know if I can find it. So basically, I think the breakpoint for 3 is level 70, area level 70, and the breakpoint for 4 is area level 75. Now, this is important because while you can do it area level 80, the mobs are going to have less health and do less damage if you do it at the lowest level where you can be rewarded with those trials. Now, you might not have level appropriate Jin Barias, for example, but that might skew into which map levels you do once you finish the campaign. So that is pretty key as well. A lot of the time, your leveling build will be better off doing the trial number 3 for the ascendancy, but the trial level 4 does require a pretty strong character for most characters, so you might not do that until you're playing your final build once you're completed with your leveling build. Now, those key levels, like the minimum levels to kind of make it as easy as possible, you should factor into when you're doing your maps. But generally speaking, if you have a good number of maps, you should kind of follow the experience formula. In my experience, it is very much the same as in POE1, so you can look it up on the POE1 wiki. Basically, there is a safe zone for experience, and if you are outside that safe zone, you get very reduced experience. So at low levels, a safe zone is 3, meaning if your character is level 10, you should be fighting monsters that are level 13, or lowest level 7. If you are not, if they're outside that range, they're going to give you crappy experience. What does this mean for you? Well, let's say you finish the campaign at level 64. You shouldn't just put in your highest map. It will actually give you crappy experience. You should put in a map that is at most 7 levels above you, but you might want to hit those breakpoints, as I mentioned, with the Jin Barya, so you can have an easy time with your ascendancy points later on. Hopefully this has been of help, and I wish you luck on your future journeys on your new characters.